When a young girl with nothing but a piggy bank walks into a powerful CEO's office and asks, "Can I buy a dad?" no one expects what comes next. It was just another Thursday morning in the towering glass fortress of Allerton Dynamics. Executives hustled from one end of the marble-floored lobby to the next, briefcases swinging, Bluetooth earpieces flashing blue. No one noticed the tiny girl walking through the revolving doors, until the security guard leaned down and asked, "Sweetheart, are you lost?" She wasn't. Her name was Lila, 7 years old, hair in 2 uneven braids, wearing an oversized dress that had once belonged to someone else. In her arms she cradled a pink ceramic piggy bank, chipped on one side and held tightly to her chest like it contained the world. Lila didn't speak to anyone as she walked straight into the elevator. Something about her quiet determination was disarming, so much so that no one stopped her. Moments later, she entered the corner office on the 42nd floor, where Donovan Reed, the CEO himself, was in a strategy meeting. She walked right up to him and asked, "Sir, can I buy a dad?" Every word in the room dropped dead. Even the ticking of the luxury wall clock seemed to stop. Donovan Reed had been called many things: ruthless, brilliant, unstoppable. He had built a global tech empire with a reputation for precision and power, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of a child standing in his office asking to purchase what she was missing most: a father. The room full of executives stared at him, waiting for a response. But Donovan, for once, was speechless. It wasn't the absurdity of the question that silenced him, it was the devastating honesty in it. Lila wasn't asking to be cute or dramatic. She meant it, every word. Slowly, Donovan rose from his high-backed leather chair. He walked around his massive desk and knelt beside her so they could see eye to eye. Without saying a word, he opened his wallet and placed several crisp bills, more than her piggy bank had ever held, into the coin slot. Lila tilted the piggy bank, watching the bills disappear inside. "Is that enough?" she asked. Donovan didn't answer with numbers. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder and said, "Let me show you something." It was the beginning of a promise he didn't yet understand he was making. Donovan didn't go back to his schedule that day. The rest of the meeting was cancelled. He couldn't concentrate. Lila's question echoed inside him like a bell rung in an empty cathedral. He'd come from nothing: foster homes, hand-me-downs, cold nights. He remembered what it was like to look around a playground and feel invisible. He had buried those memories under years of ambition, but Lila had unearthed them with just 5 words. Later that evening, Donovan sat alone in his study with a glass of scotch untouched beside him. His assistant had gathered background information. Lila was being raised by her grandmother after her mother passed away in an accident. Her father missing, gone long before Lila could even form a memory of him. The report said they lived in a housing complex on the east side. Donovan looked at the faded photo paper clipped to the file. Lila was smiling in her school picture, but it was the kind of smile kids use when they don't want adults to worry. He had the resources to help, but more than that, he suddenly wanted to. Not with a donation, with presence, with time. Something no one had ever given him. It wasn't a media stunt. It wasn't a PR move. The next morning, Donovan traded his tailored suit for jeans, a sweater, and a baseball cap. No driver, no assistant, just him. He drove himself to the apartment complex listed in Lila's file. The building was tired, cracks on the stucco walls, paint peeling from the railings. On the 3rd floor, an elderly woman answered the door with suspicion. "You're the man from the picture," she said cautiously, eyeing his expensive watch. Donovan introduced himself and explained why he was there. "I met Lila yesterday. I'd like to help if that's all right." The grandmother crossed her arms. "Help how? With a scholarship? Some kind of fund?" He shook his head. "With time, with company, with showing up." At that moment, Lila came to the door. She smiled when she saw him, like they had a secret the rest of the world wasn't ready to understand. He knelt again, as he had the day before, and asked, "Do you like books?" She nodded. "I like ones with families in them." That night he sent over a box full of them, not to impress, but to begin. Helping didn't mean just writing a check. Donovan knew that all too well. Money could build schools, fund hospitals, and launch foundations, but it couldn't eat lunch with you. It couldn't walk you to school. It couldn't cheer at your school play. So Donovan began showing up, not just as a donor, but as a friend. He picked Lila up on Saturdays and took her to places she'd never seen: museums, aquariums, local bookstores. He learned her favorite color was lavender, and that she loved the smell of cinnamon. She learned that he drank his coffee black, and that he didn't like elevators even though he owned the building. Over time, Lila's spirit seemed to bloom. Her teachers reported better grades, more confidence. She spoke more, laughed more. And with each visit Donovan found pieces of himself returning, fragments of joy he thought he had traded away for power. At a school assembly, one of the staff asked, "Are you Lila's dad?" Donovan hesitated, then smiled. "I'm working on it," he replied. And in truth he was, not through legal papers, but with consistency, warmth, and the rarest kind of love, the kind that doesn't expect anything back. It was bound to happen. When someone as high profile as Donovan Reed starts appearing in public with a little girl no one's ever seen before, questions get asked, and the cameras start flashing. One Saturday morning, as Donovan walked Lila out of a small children's bookstore, a paparazzo snapped a photo of them holding hands, both laughing. By evening, the tabloids had headlines like, "Secret Daughter, Billionaire's Hidden Family," and "Who is the Mystery Girl with Donovan Reed?" His PR team was in a frenzy, urging him to issue a statement or deny the rumors, but Donovan refused. "This isn't about them," he told his assistant. To Lila he simply said, "Let them talk, we know what this is." He was more worried about shielding her from the noise. So he canceled several public appearances and made a point to spend quieter days with her, away from cameras. It wasn't fame she needed, it was safety. Lila's 8th birthday was coming up. When Donovan asked how she wanted to celebrate, she didn't ask for a party or a trip. Instead, she said, "Can we have cupcakes at the community center, so other kids can come too?" That answer made Donovan's heart swell. He rented out the local youth center, not the fanciest venue but one filled with color and warmth. There were balloons, face painters, and a make-your-own cupcake table. But more importantly, there were over 50 kids from the neighborhood, many of whom had never had a birthday party of their own. Donovan watched as Lila greeted each guest personally, and handed out small goodie bags. "I want them to know they matter too," she whispered. She even gave away half her presents. For Donovan, who had once measured success in boardroom victories, this was a different kind of win. A lesson in generosity taught by an 8-year-old with a big heart. Back at Allerton Dynamics, not everyone shared Donovan's new vision. In a quarterly board meeting, one executive openly voiced what many were thinking. "You're distracted," he said bluntly. "What's this Project Haven talk? We're a tech company, not a charity." Donovan stood at the head of the table, silent for a moment. Then, with unshakable calm, he replied, "And yet our greatest product might be the kind of world we leave behind." He presented a new proposal. Allocate 10% of corporate profits annually to mentorship and child development initiatives across the country. Some scoffed. Others murmured concern about investor reactions. But Donovan didn't flinch. "I've built something powerful here. But power means nothing if it can't help someone like Lila." That day he reminded them that true leadership was measured not in stock price but in impact, and slowly, one by one, the room began to shift in agreement. Project Haven launched 6 months later with little fanfare, but deep purpose. What began as a vision to help one girl evolved into a national program that paired professionals from all industries with vulnerable children seeking guidance, encouragement, and stability. Donovan funded it personally at first, then later brought in other philanthropists and business leaders who were inspired by his hands-on approach. Mentorship wasn't about photo ops or tax breaks. It was about consistency. Volunteers were required to commit to monthly check-ins, school support, and family involvement. The first year, 300 children were enrolled. The following year, 1,200. Stories poured in, of failing grades turning into honor rolls, of quiet kids becoming confident speakers, and of adults discovering a kind of joy they hadn't known they were missing. It wasn't charity, it was community, and Donovan made sure it all started with the same principle that changed his life: presence. At the end of 3rd grade, Lila's teacher assigned a simple essay. What does love feel like? While most children wrote about parents, pets, or favorite toys, Lila's response moved everyone who read it. She wrote, "Love feels like someone remembering your favorite story. It feels like being picked up from school even when it rains, like someone clapping at your play even if you mess up, like warm hands and no rushing. Love feels like Donovan." The teacher sent a copy of the essay to Donovan, unsure how he would react. When he read it, he didn't say a word. He just sat back in his chair, staring out the window, eyes glistening. That single page, written in a child's handwriting, said more than any corporate success ever could. It wasn't proof of a donation, it was proof of transformation. Lila wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving, and so was he. When Donovan suggested therapy, Lila tilted her head in confusion. "Am I broken?" she asked. That question alone told Donovan how delicate the conversation had to be. He sat beside her and gently explained, "No, sweetheart, talking doesn't mean something's wrong. It means we're taking care of what matters most, your heart." At first she resisted, But when Donovan added, "I'll go with you if it helps," her defenses softened. So began their bi-weekly sessions with Dr. Arla Mendoza, a compassionate child psychologist with a warm voice and shelves lined with storybooks and art supplies. Donovan didn't just drop Lila off. He sat in the waiting room or joined when invited. He wanted her to know she wasn't navigating this alone. Through drawings, games, and gentle questions, Lila began to unravel some of the pain she had hidden behind smiles. And Donovan, too, began to reflect on his own childhood, on his fears of failing her. Healing wasn't immediate, but it began together. Lila was 10 when she applied to the prestigious Arts Academy in the city. She had worked tirelessly on her sketch portfolio. Late nights bent over paper, her fingers stained with charcoal and pastel. Donovan had supported her every step, framing her best work and even setting up an art corner in his office. When the rejection letter came, Lila sat frozen on the couch, blinking back tears. "Maybe I'm not good enough," she whispered. Donovan knelt beside her just like he had the first day they met. "You are more than good enough," he said. "This letter doesn't define you." He retrieved a sketchbook she'd once abandoned in his car and handed it to her. "Your story isn't over because of one no. It's just a comma. Keep drawing. Keep dreaming." Lila looked up at him with watery eyes and asked, "Will you still believe in me?" "Always," Donovan said without hesitation. Lila's grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her mother's death, fell ill quietly. One hospital visit turned into several, and Donovan stayed involved, taking Lila to appointments, bringing homemade soup, and sitting beside the old woman's bed in silence. One spring night, as petals fell from the cherry trees outside, Lila's grandmother passed away peacefully. Lila was asleep in the chair beside her, curled under Donovan's coat. Donovan handled everything: funeral arrangements, paperwork, even notifying distant relatives. But the hardest moment came when Lila woke up and realized her world had changed forever. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply looked at Donovan and said, "Please don't leave me too." Donovan, with aching tenderness, pulled her into his arms and whispered, "Not today, not ever." It wasn't a promise made out of guilt. It was a vow rooted in love. Years passed. Lila blossomed into a confident, artistic teenager. Though Donovan had never adopted her officially, everyone around them knew their bond was unshakable. She called him D, and he called her Sunbeam. One quiet evening, as they sat watching an old animated film on the couch, Lila looked up and asked, "Do you think, maybe you'd ever want to adopt me?" Donovan paused, not because he doubted, but because the question was sacred. "You already feel like my daughter," he said softly, "but if it would make you feel more secure, then yes. Let's make it official." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I know paper doesn't change love, but I think it'll help me sleep easier at night." They began the process the next week, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. It was a step that turned their emotional truth into legal permanence. Lila's journey came full circle years later. Now a young adult, she had pursued psychology with a focus on trauma and child development, partly inspired by her sessions with Dr. Mendoza, and partly by her life with Donovan. One rainy afternoon, a small boy stepped into her cozy office, holding a plastic dinosaur and shuffling nervously in oversized boots. He looked up at her and asked, "Can I get a friend here?" Lila smiled gently, remembering the question that had once changed her life. She knelt beside him and said, "You already have one." As the boy settled into the playroom, Lila glanced at the photograph on her desk, her and Donovan at her graduation, both grinning wide. Her heart swelled. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She had become a safe place for others, just as Donovan had been for her. The circle was complete, but her mission was only beginning. Donovan never craved public applause. After the success of Project Haven, he slowly stepped back from corporate life. He sold his shares, moved into a quieter home, and redirected his energy toward causes that mattered: education, mentorship, community. His wealth was no longer about net worth, but impact. He lived long enough to see Project Haven scale internationally, with branches in over a dozen countries. Thousands of children found mentors, and those mentors often said the same thing: "I thought I was giving my time, but I got more back than I ever expected." But Donovan's true legacy wasn't in the headlines or balance sheets. It was Lila. A girl once looking to buy a dad had grown into a woman helping others feel less alone. She became a quiet but fierce voice in the world of mental health, youth advocacy, and trauma healing. Donovan passed peacefully in his sleep, a journal at his bedside filled with drawings, letters from Lila, and notes to himself that read, "Show up, stay, listen." A few days after Donovan's passing, Lila received a thick envelope with her name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a letter he'd written years before but kept sealed until the right moment. It read, My sunbeam, you once asked me if money could buy a dad. The truth is, I didn't have an answer that day, not in words, but every moment with you has taught me what fatherhood truly means. You didn't buy me, you found me. You saved me in ways no boardroom or bank account ever could. You gave me purpose. You gave me a second chance at childhood, through yours. And you gave me the honor of being your dad. Love always, D. Lila pressed the letter to her chest and cried, not in sorrow but in gratitude. She had lost him in body, but not in spirit. His words would guide her forever. In the years following Donovan's death, his story began to reach even more people, this time through a documentary titled Staying. The story of Lila and Dee, filmmakers interviewed former mentees from Project Haven, teachers who saw Lila grow, and therapists who spoke about the ripple effect of long-term mentorship. The documentary didn't focus on Donovan's wealth, it focused on his willingness to stay. The narrative unfolded like a quiet revolution against transactional charity. Instead of check writing, it showed chair holding at school plays. Instead of public awards, it showed private vulnerable moments between a man and a child learning to trust again. Viewers across the world, educators, policymakers, parents, were moved. Universities began showing the film in psychology and social policy classes. It wasn't just inspiring, it was instructive. And at every screening, the final message lingered. It only takes one person to stay, and when they do, everything can change. By her late 20s, Lila had become a quiet force in advocacy. She spoke at global conferences, not as a celebrity or influencer, but as someone who had lived the statistics people quoted. When she took the stage, she began not with numbers, but with a question. Do you know what happens when a child believes they're worth showing up for? She told her story. Not sensationally, but with truth. About how a man once knelt to meet her eye level. About how he showed up again, and again, and again. Her words resonated. People cried. Legislators listened. Foundations reshaped their giving models. And thousands of youth workers adopted a new motto. Presence is the promise. Lila always ended her talks the same way. If we want to change the future, we don't need more heroes. We need more people who stay. And as she left the podium, Donovan's memory walked with her every step. If this story moved you, if Lila's bravery and Donovan's quiet kindness stirred something in your heart, there are more stories just like this waiting to be told. Stories of second chances, unexpected bonds, and the kind of love that asks for nothing in return but still gives everything. Subscribe to our channel for more emotional, transformational narratives that explore the depth of human connection and the power of compassion. Because somewhere out there, another little girl is holding a piggy bank. And someone, somewhere, is about to answer her question, not with money, but with love that stays. Subscribe now, stay with us.